lit only by the smallest beams, where shadows play and whispers hum. The journey's where we all come from.
Grandpa, when I'll grow up, I will be a horseman, the best in the world.
Step by step we carve the stone.
Well, young man, you've bitten off more than you can chew. You know that, right?
I know.
Being a horseman is not just a profession. You have to be born a horseman, and must to work humbly for a lifetime. Come, son, I'll show you something.
The stories we embrace.
The rider's journey is not an easy one. It is paved with disappointment and failure, a hard, demanding path, but ultimately a glorious one. But you know, my son, no matter how difficult the road may be, glory awaits those who truly deserve it, those who may even change the world forever.
Push the mountains, feel the sun. Every battle is a race begun.
Where do I start? The 19th century was the golden age of romance and literature, as well as a time of industrial revolution and significant change. In the second half of the 1800s, a visionary named Federico Caprilli revolutionized the sport of show jumping with his groundbreaking ideas. This became known as the Caprilli method, which laid the foundation for modern horse training and later became one of the cornerstones of the renowned Bertalan method. Bertalan, officially known as the Hungarian School of Riding and Horse-Drawn Teachers, in the early 1900s also played a leading role in the field of equestrianism. The spirit of Caprilli filled the entire place. Training followed a strict system, and the work done here later influenced the entire equestrian world.
Until the end of World War II, until 1944, the School of Riding and Horse-Drawn Teachers operated here in Orkney. The cavalry camp itself later reported the name of the Orkney camp in the public opinion. The school quickly gained a great reputation, as the equestrian instructors trained here achieved significant results internationally. The same teachers, the same priests were trained as riding teachers and horse-drawn teachers, because these teachers trained the riders of the cavalry troops. This was their task, and they were also the trainers of the soldiers belonging to the charioteer corps.
The School of Riding and Horse-Drawn Teachers operated for a relatively short time, just 14 years. During this period, however, it produced many famous equestrians. One of them was a young cavalry officer, Bertalan de Némethy.
Bertalan de Némethy was my grandmother's brother, and through this connection we had a strong and very close family relationship with Bert, whom thank God I knew very well. He was a defining member of our family. Before I met him for the first time, his legend and the story of his life were already part of our daily lives. In the 1980s, in the international equestrian community, he was a very successful and well-known figure. And my grandmother and our mother-in-law, who also lived with us, they looked up to him. They saw him as a saint or a demigod, and that's how they presented him to me, as a demigod. Once during a conversation with Bert, he told me that he chose the military path under the influence of his uncle. His parents did not support this decision. One of his uncles, Tibor Némethy, was a horse artillery officer and an active figure in the world of equestrian sport. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, he was also a concours rider, and his life inspired Bertalan to choose the Ledovica Academy. Moreover, he did everything he could to join the cavalry. I should note that this was a pretty big deal at the time because, as a consequence of the Treaty of Trianon, the dictations imposed on us had significantly reduced the size of the Hungarian army. But Bert reached his goal, as he had already shown serious talent in equestrian sports. After serving as a team officer, he was able to directly enter the School of Riding and Horse-Drawn Teachers, and later, he went to Krampnitz. He was there.
The cavalry school in Örkény, there was an older, more mature group of riders, Shaurek, Bodo, and a number of others who were really accomplished and respected. And then there was a new generation, Béla Tóth, Némethy, Balko, Inkei, a number of young and up-and-coming riders. And they started to compete internationally. They were so strong that almost it was a foregone conclusion that they are going to go into the next Olympic Games very strong, very well prepared, and very much a contender. Well, it never happened because the war came.
During the World War II, as soon as the front approached, the School of Riding and Horse-Drawn Teachers was relocated to the area beyond the Danube. Later on, it was also divided. This is how the history of the School of Riding and Horse-Drawn Teachers came to an end.
Those times were not peaceful. The world was on fire. The years of peace at Orkney camp soon came to an end. They were soldiers, and in such difficult times, that meant responsibility and sacrifice. Némethy, like so many others, was on the front line, and not just anywhere. He was there at one of the most terrible and tragic moments in Hungarian history. He was part of a chapter when more than 100,000 Hungarian soldiers lost their lives in just a few days, far from home, at the bend of the Don River.
He led an independent Hussar squadron, which meant that although it was a regular Hussar unit, it was equipped with additional skills and capabilities, making it a stronger formation than a standard squadron on its own. He was the leader of the 9th Independent Hussar Squadron, which was deployed at the Don River. He told me countless times about the battles there, and how his horse exploded beneath him, an event he miraculously survived without a scratch.
In January 1943, the Soviet troops broke through the Hungarian defense lines at the Don River. The poorly equipped and starving Hungarian soldiers stood no chance against the overwhelming force. Within days, the entire Hungarian army was practically destroyed. For the survivors, retreat was no easy task, as the Soviets had encircled the remaining troops. Némethy and his soldiers found themselves in this desperate situation. Their only chance of winning was to break out of the enemy encirclement.
They came home. After successfully breaking through, they traveled on foot, and out of 300 men, only about 30 survived.
At the time of the assassination attempt of Hitler on June 19, Bert was stationed in Krabnitz. The conspiratorial officers of Operation Victories were also in Krabnitz. They often held secret meetings here. They had to do it very quietly. Fortunately for them, equestrian events were often held in Krabnitz, which was a good cover story for them. Bert knew several of the participant officers personally. There were those who were later executed, including Stauffenberg, who directed the whole thing.
After the failed assassination attempt on Hitler, reprisals began in Krabnitz. Némethy thought it best to request a reassignment. He was transferred to Bromberg, Poland, but as the front lines advanced, he was forced to flee from there as well. They had to leave in a hurry, as while the Soviets were approaching from the east, the Germans in the west had started conscription to stop the enemy.
We walked 550 or 560 miles from Bromberg to Munster. We did this from the 10th of January to the beginning of March. In 1945, we met during a very difficult time. We stayed in a village in Poland on the first night during a big snowstorm. There was a church, and one of the walls of this church protected us from the snow and freezing wind. We were standing on the top of the hill. We were holding our horses. We were resting and trying to sleep. Suddenly someone speaks next to me. It was a familiar voice. "Are you here too?" It was Bert. He was standing next to me and held his horse.
They managed to cross the Elbe just in time, as the SS had mobilized every unit stationed east of it for combat. On that day, under the leadership of Bertalan de Némethy and Deja Szilagyi, they covered 70 kilometers in a single day. A superhuman achievement, fueled by perseverance and not least by the instinct for survival.
After Munster, we went up to Denmark. For the first time, we were in the town of Præstø, on the southwest coast of the Baltic Sea. That's where we got into trouble with the Gestapo. But you know, that was a weak gang, a bunch of little lads. We weren't afraid of them. We would have dealt with them without weapons. Every night, the British dropped supplies from airplanes to the freedom fighters. Every night. There was a big forest near Præstø with a clearing in the middle. They dropped the supplies there. The Germans said that the clearing must be occupied. It must be enclosed. We did that. We surrounded the forest, but to protect it, because we expected that the Germans would also come. We looked for cover among the trees, so that if the Germans came, we would take care of them. Surprisingly, they didn't come. When the war was over, on May, the English came to us to liberate. They already knew what the situation was because the Danes told them that we were not enemies. They gave us a certificate that said we were friendly enemies, but it was not given by the guerrillas, but by the official bodies. We also had small ID cards.
Some returned home, but most remained abroad, including Bertalan. He stayed in Denmark, where he became actively involved in the country's equestrian life. Using his strong personal connections, he became the horse trainer for the Danish royal family.
He stayed in Denmark. We said goodbye to each other. It was hard. You know, it was like he was my brother.
The Hungarian equestrian culture lost a significant part of the excellent professionals who graduated from the school of riding and horse-drawn teachers. At best, they were only able to use the knowledge of those who stayed in Hungary to a very small extent, because these officers were either forced to emigrate, like Bertalan de Némethy, or if they stayed at home, then deportations, stigmatization, and, in the worst case, death awaited them. During the Soviet occupation, those who remained at home suffered continuous misfortunes. In addition, they had no access to horse training opportunities at all.
The Hungarian high school totally was done and finished.
At this point, Bertalan de Némethy's story took a new turn, marking the beginning of a much more promising journey. As the plane headed to the United States, no one knew it was carrying a man destined for a brighter future, a man who would soon be known as Bert de Némethy.
All-American dream, it's in the air. Gonna reach for the stars, gonna break free.
My father was the coach in 1952. This is an important time because it is the first civilian team. Up until this time, the U.S. cavalry did everything. But suddenly, there was no more cavalry, and the civilians now had to pick up the pieces. The teams in 1952 were put together. Owners had a horse, rider had experience, they were put together, they were trained, and they went to the Olympics. We used this system, sort of, but there was no driving force, there was no organizing center. And then in 1955, the equestrian team, my father had passed away, they were looking for a new coach. And they hired this Hungarian fellow named Bertalan de Némethy. It's important to understand that his principles were an explosion in this country because the cavalry officers had retired and there was nothing.
At that time, there were a number of Hungarian immigrants who were very good horsemen. Gabor Foltanye was top class. He was a little bit younger than Bert. Bert and Gabor were the two people who adapted to this country well.
Arthur McCashin, who was the big honcho and rider of the USCT with Bill Steingrass, somehow they got wind of Bert.
Valco Stables was in New Jersey, and they apparently hired Bertalan de Némethy, and because of Dad's connection with the U.S. team, I think the owner of Valco brought Bertalan by, and my dad said, this gentleman really knows his horses, and we eventually knew that we could maybe steal him from Valco Stables, and my dad went to Whitney Stone, head of the USCT at the time, and said, here's a coach that will move the US team up dramatically.
And Bert went down in New Jersey to try for this position which he inherited on the team. And they put him, Arthur McCashin, supposedly, I wasn't there, put him on he had a very hot, another Palomino. There were 2 or 3 Palominos at that time. This was a very difficult, very hot horse. And in about 5 minutes, Bert had the horse on the bit, going like a pussy cat. They'd never seen the horse go like that. It was 5 minutes. He got the job. That's how he got the job on the team, not jumping big fences, riding Madison Square. No, he got the job of riding a crazy, wild, hot horse 5 minutes. Bert found his slot.
So Olympics was Helsinki. Prior to that, all of the teams for the US were selected out of the Army. They were all representatives of the Army, and they would pick a horse and, okay, lieutenant, whomever, you guys are going to do show jumping, and well, maybe this horse, he will do eventing. It was really quite a different thing. But all of the horses and riders came out of the Army. So Bert was our first real chef to keep. He really put together. He had a system. He had a system of flat work, and he had a system of gymnastics. And gymnastics were virtually unknown in the U.S. at that period. And he was really very dedicated to putting together a system of flat work and gymnastics to improve the horses and riders. That's the French way of riding. Go forward, go straight, and have them mentally relaxed. The horse has to be mentally relaxed. So do riders.
Bert de Némethy's, I should say, singular contribution was this idea of gymnastic training for jumpers, and the idea that you could create a series of jumps sequentially that demanded from the horse's own participation in judging the fences and judging the distances, and then making the appropriate athletic effort to do that. It relied on the horse's ability to bring their hind legs underneath them and to lift through their withers. And they simply can't do that if their background is not in some kind of elementary dressage, because that's what the whole purpose of the flat work is about, to get horses to be able to understand with the rider on them how to use their backs, how to bring their hind legs underneath them, and how to lift through their withers. So if you take a horse that's tense, crooked, and hollow back and present him to a series of cavalettes and gymnastics, it teaches them nothing. You know, they don't get anything out of it except to get more upset. So in order to have those gymnastic exercises work, the prerequisite is that they have to be at a certain level on the flat.
Cavaletti and dressage for jumpers was new to us, you know, and as a professional, I did flat work, and I certainly got away with it in the juniors, but I just wanted to jump. I had no interest really in flat work, and he opened my eyes to how important it really is, especially with the thoroughbreds. You know, they were very sensitive, and though we were then just used to going forward and nothing else, he really opened everyone's eyes on how to make your horse fit and balanced.
He really focused on trying to have the horses go in the proper way so that a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, they were really successful. They weren't looking to fix the horse for next week.
Bert every year would go around the country and they would have trials, and he would select riders who he thought were capable of being on the team and trying to build a base of riders. That was the process that was done. There was trials, there were selection trials, and then these riders were invited to come to Gladstone to spend a winter there training.
At that time, Gladstone was the headquarters for the United States equestrian team, and it was really, for us, the model of how we should run our stables and how we should prepare for competition and things like that. And that was the huge influence of Bert. And so we had crossover into going to Gladstone on occasion for different things.
When you arrived at Gladstone, you went into a monastery. You dedicated yourself to a life of horses. And I would say, for the most part, that happened. Not always. These were young people. But that was mostly.
Bert was a charmer. He was so charming. We used to always sort of laugh because he drove his little tiny Volkswagen. Today it would be probably a relic, but it was a classic. And you'd see it, you could hear it long before you'd see him come over the hill and down. We would all be out riding in the big ring there, beautiful ring. And he would arrive impeccable, not a hair out of place, had the same beautiful leather gloves. There was never, ever anything out of place. It was impeccable.
Despite the many years that he spent in this country, his accent never changed. So he just had some very funny ways of telling stories that were as winsome in part because of his unique accent and use of language than for any other reason.
What sensations should the rider feel when the horse is correctly on the bit?
What is the sensations of feeling when the horse is on the bit?
Perfect English with a Hungarian accent so you understood nothing. Nothing.
And after that, the hind leg start to coming on, that is when the rider upper body shifting back.
I loved his translations. His English, it was actually quite good, but he'd have little expressions. Don't fall off. And he'd better not fall off. But things like that. And he was a little bit strict, but always in a very polite, nice way.
Gladstone, of course, was an amazing facility, and Bert and his staff ran it like a military operation. Bert was the general. He brought with him the foundation of what our sport, I believe, in the United States ended up being. The flat work, the gymnastics, the basics before you ever even go in the ring were absolutely crucial to Bert.
When Bert was the coach, the owners would give the horses to the team for the purposes of competition. And so then Bert would make the decision of who rode the horse. And sometimes the owners wanted to influence it, and sometimes they had good ideas, and sometimes they didn't have good ideas. But it was Bert's decision who rode what horse, where, and all that kind of thing, and that would be unheard of today.
It was not only that Bert taught you how to ride up there, he taught you when you went to Gladstone, you were there with the horses. You learned, what they were doing with the horses, how they got taken care of, how they were fed.
And when I got to Gladstone, it was not like being in the military, but it was totally organized. There would be a list every night, and I remember riding a horse at 7, a horse at 8, a horse at 9, and so on and so forth. And it was really quite a routine. Bert would lunge us on horses for an hour, and it would go all day long with a very strict schedule.
It was a Camelot era for Bert de Némethy at Gladstone.
He liked opera, and he turned up some music, I think, from Verdi, and put it on the speaker, and he started singing while I was riding. And he didn't say a word to me, he sat in the bleachers singing while I was riding. It was very surreal, but I'll never forget that.
He was a ladies' man. He was socially a very, very attractive person with the best manners that you can imagine and great style. And in that world of riding, it's important.
Oh my God, as a person, he was just such a gentleman, such style. Yeah, he looked so good in his black tie.
Bert was of the old school, an iron fist and a velvet glove. I had 3 summer dinner jackets for the tour. Conventional black, tropical white, and tropical light blue jackets. It was very chic in this country. So we're at Dublin at the Russell Hotel, I think it was. It was the Key Barracks dinner. I come down the staircase in my powder blue dinner jacket. Bert's face gets beet red. And he points to me and says, "Up." And I wheeled on the haunch and went back and got my black one.
I was, 19, 20. That was when there was a model named Twiggy. And she had short blonde hair, British, wore short pants and blonde and big black eyelashes. So that was me. But so I showed up in my little short pants one day and to go to a town hall reception. Nope, back upstairs, put on a longer skirt.
You're not just you are not a rider, you are representing your country. You have to you have to be an example. You can't be idiots. We can't be, 20-year-olds running around acting like idiots and showing up drunk everywhere and things like that. So.
I was taking care of horses there in Gladstone, and my family came to visit. And my mother came, my father came, and my little sister, who was 11 years younger than me. And I think she was maybe 4 or 5 years old. She was maybe 4. And don't forget, I was just a groom working for a stable. There was no reason for him to be particularly nice to me, but this is how he was as a human being. He had I'm sure, a very, very busy day, because every day was busy. But when my parents came with my little sister, there's the rotunda there, right when you come into Gladstone. He came out to meet them. He came out, he told them, you have a nice son. And he picked my little sister up and he took her up into the air and he told her, "Oh, you're so lucky to have such a nice brother as your brother John." And here's 45 years later, and it touched me then, and I just thought, this is really a wonderful thing, this kind of man that would do that. Then he proceeded to give my mom and dad and my sister a tour around Gladstone and treat the whole thing as though I was the most important person in the world, and he was very proud to show Gladstone as something very special that I was part of.
He was very generous with his time and teaching the locals. Sunday afternoon, very often he had sort of clinics. If you showed up on Sunday afternoon, you got a lesson from Bert de Némethy for free, you know. He just, you know, he was very interested in promoting the sport in the right way.
He was just winsome. You know, it would be very difficult to be, you know, not a fan of his.
Gladstone was obviously the mecca of the U.S. equestrian team, but one of my first impressions of Gladstone was very early on. It was the winter session. If not the very first night before our first session, all of a sudden there was, everything was, you could hear the noise going on downstairs, and it's dark, and we couldn't figure out what was going on.
We had a fire at the team. The van that brought some horses in late at night, and for some reason the truck caught on fire, and the fire went up into the stable.
So here was Gladstone on fire.
I had one of the guys, one of Bert's head grooms there, and I got along with him. Well, I said, you know, I asked him, I said, please come knock on my door early, because I said, I don't want to sleep through my first day. I don't want to be late to work. I said, that would be horrible. I'm up there, and I get the knock on the door, and I said, oh God. I got up, I got dressed, man. I was in my riding clothes, my boots and breeches, right? Everybody else is downstairs in their pajamas, outside and standing in the snow. But here's Steve, dressed, ready to go.
Seeing Bert operate and his whole staff when Gladstone was on fire, and it was just another day, and it was a problem to be solved.
In the 60s and 70s, I can remember Bert organizing the tours. We would go to Europe for 2 or 3 months. And I have certain memories of it. And one specific memory is he was writing to all the hotels to make reservations. And that's something that's unheard of now, writing to a hotel to make reservations for 6 riders and 6 grooms. It was a different world, but he was totally organized. He kept good records. And he'd have to organize the airplane, transportation in Europe, entries for the horse show, hotels, meals. He had a lot on his plate, and he did it very well, because there's a lot of order to it.
When we were in Europe, there were 17 horses we were competing with on the team. And I would say within 3 weeks after we got home, everybody got a booklet of 100 pages of every horse's results, every class, every rider. He'd make a note if the rider made the fault or if the horse made the fault. And, you know, good classes, bad classes, didn't matter. He had it, you know, in black and white.
When I first was on the team as a 19-year-old, I found out very quickly there was a pecking order, established, of course, by Bert. So we show up in Germany. The first show that we went to was Wiesbaden. I was the youngest rider, so I found out very quickly that meant I'm carrying all the suitcases for all the senior members. And I'm also driving the Volkswagen bus. We had a Volkswagen bus that we'd drive around. And so we're driving by, we're not quite in Cologne. And I turned to Bert and I said, you know, this must be, I mean, I'm from Los Angeles, so this must be the largest city in the world. How many exits is Ausfahrt? I mean, the city of Ausfahrt is huge, enormous. And then he just shook his head and he said, just Ridland, I don't know what I'm going to do with you.
We got, and I believe it was our trip in 1976, we're competing in England. And at that point, England had, you could bet. So I'm riding a horse that was recovering from an injury, but I'm in a class where it's a speed class, but it's a table A. It's not like power or, you know, faults converted class. Robert or Michael, I'm not sure who it was, Michael was into racehorse a lot. He said, hey, "You're going off at 15-1 today." He said, "We should put money on you." And I go, "Okay." So I get to the end gate and Bert tells me, "Just go for a nice, safe, clean round. This horse is recovering from an injury." And I look up in the stands and all the guys are showing me their tickets going, "Come on, come on." So I do the first part and I pretend like he's running away with me as I'm kicking the crap out of him to get to the other end. I end up winning the class. All the guys come down from the stands waving this money where they've gone and collected tickets. And Bert's Bert's telling me, "I thought you were just going for a safe clear." I said, "He was getting away from me. He was running away. I couldn't hold him back, so I just went with it." And all the guys come down, he looks at me, he says, I am smelling a fish." And he was always so just right to the point. He got a chuckle out of it, but we were never allowed to bet on ourselves after that.
The USET did start with private donations or people loaning their horses to the USET. When I went to Gladstone the first time in 1970, there were at least 20 horses there. And they were all on loan to the I don't know if they were donated or loaned, but whatever the structure was, they were given to Bert to supervise, to train, control. That was in 1970. I would say in the late 70s, that whole system began to change. There were more and more private individuals involved, and everybody began to go their own way. And I would say, when I was there, it was the beginning of the end of a team structure as it was. There's always a team, but they don't train together anymore. Everyone trains on their own, they get selected on their own, and they come together as a team when it's time.
It was a major transition for all of us when we moved from having the team basically supply the horses to private individuals supplying the horses.
In the United States, we have a very interesting history of that, with Gladstone being the center of our equestrian team, and one time all the horses were loaned to the USET. As a matter of fact, we still have it, that when a rider is going to ride a Nations Cup, formally the owner loans the horse to the team, and we still have that. We have a loan agreement. But at one point, that was a fledgling organization getting going and had to find a way to mount these riders, and there were very few riders that could ride at an international level. Not to say they weren't great riders, but riders that specialized in what would be the Olympic discipline of show jumping, as opposed to riding hunters or something like that. So as I said before, it's not history is not a static thing. So eventually, young whippersnapper, and that's more in the history than what I actually saw. But the remnants of that, we were on the cutting edge of starting to change. So I was one of those whippersnappers that probably he didn't like so much sometimes, because we started running, we used Gladstone as an example, we started running our own stables and using that as a model. And then I have to say, sooner or later, and I think it was really, history happens over a period of time without an on-off switch. So I think that Bert was also great to be able to evolve with it, but maybe it was natural and correct. I think he might have thought that in the end.
82 was his last year. He remained there. And he lived in Gladstone. He didn't move to Florida till the late 80s. But he understood what change was. I can't imagine the change that there was in his life from early Hungary to where he retired in Sarasota, Florida. But he understood it, and he didn't resist at all. He understood change.
He ventured out and he wanted to do course designing. And I guess I think he probably did in like 1980, the World Cup finals in Baltimore. and he asked me if I would come and help him.
Bert is the one that started the new course designing. Less material, more accurate, and carefulness.
We knew something about the Olympic Games, but as a management person, I really didn't know exactly what was involved in putting on the Olympic equestrian events. But I studied and I learned, and we applied to be the Olympic site for 1984. And sometime in the late 70s, we were awarded the Games. I don't remember exactly where I first met Bert, but he was an icon, sort of a god to all of us, like Billy Steinkraus was. And these were the most important people in the sport. He was appointed to be the course designer for the Games, somewhere around there. And he was concerned about doing it because he was he was a perfectionist.
'84 was coming up, and again, honored, privileged to be his assistant, to go to LA. And that was my first exposure to, that type of international competition.
When Bert did the Los Angeles Olympics, I know he put a lot of time and thought into the whole process. I remember him saying that he would be at the ring all day. This was before the Games, and he would see where the sun set and the sun rose, so horses wouldn't be going into the sunlight. There are so many details he took care of that I wouldn't have thought of in a million years. He wanted to place the jumps specifically around the ring so every spectator had a good sight of everything. And I would say the jumps he built were really, really beautiful. They represented a lot of things of Los Angeles and other Olympics. And I think that started a trend, that each jump had a personality.
Bert changed course designing forever in those Games because he was very concerned in the years leading up to the Games that the Olympics had just gotten to be these mountainous jumps that only a few people could jump, a few horses could jump. And he really believed in the spirit of the Olympic Games, Olympism, that everybody should have a chance.
He equalized the stress not all on the horse's ability, but the rider's ability to get to the jump. So that had never been seen before.
I assured him that cost was no object. Of course it was, but it really wasn't as far as he was concerned, because I wanted him to have an absolutely free hand. And he said, well, building the right set of jumps is very expensive. I said, Bert, I don't even know how much money you're talking about, but nothing is more important than the right equipment and the right jumps. And you're the course designer, and I want you to have whatever you want, whoever you want to build them, however you want them built, however you want them designed. You decide, and that's the way it'll be. And then when the time came to ship the jumps to California, I remember John Ammerman calling me, and he said, Alan, do you know how Bert is shipping these jumps out there? And I said, no, what difference does that make? He said, Alan, he's having them moved by like a furniture mover. This is extremely expensive. And I said, look, John, I told him whatever he wants, he gets, so whatever it's going to be. He said, do you know how much this is going to cost? I said, look, I've told him over and over again, whatever it takes. So I want him to be happy, and so he was happy.
The Los Angeles Olympics were so exciting for me because I grew up right there, Pasadena, my house. I stayed at home. I didn't stay in any village or anything. I could stay at my house. And we had had horse shows at Santa Anita a year or two before to prepare for the Los Angeles Olympics and how the racetrack, how would it be on the racetrack, and all the talk and the hype of the games coming to Los Angeles. So when they actually came and they opened the racetrack and put in the whole Olympic arena, I mean, it was amazing.
I was sitting with Prince Philip, usually during the jumping and definitely during the team jumping. I think that almost that whole day. And Prince Philip had put a chart together of the course, and he was marking where horses had faults on the course. And this was a trademark of Bert, and any good course designer. Went on for hours and hours and hours. I mean, almost all day. I mean, it was the largest team competition, team jumping in the history of the Olympic Games was in 1984. I mean, it might have been bigger since then, I don't know, but it was the biggest up to that point. And Prince Philip, about, I don't know, a third of the way or halfway through the class, shoved his sheet over to me and said, "Alan, just look at this. Isn't this remarkable? The faults are spread out all over the course." That's Bert. That's so difficult to do, so difficult to do. And nobody could, say, "Oh, well, that was so hard, nobody could do it." Or "This is so easy, everybody could do it." Because every jump, every place on the course presented a different problem.
Well, Touch of Class was a thoroughbred, and it was obviously a good horse. And I have no words to say. I was lucky to be able to ride that horse. It was just lucky to come together. It wasn't because of me or anything. It just happened. I'm glad it happened. It just happened. What can I say? I mean, it was a special horse. I had no thought of winning it wasn't in my head to succeed as well as I did in the Olympics. You just do the best. When you get to a competition, do the best you can. That's all you do, is the best you can, and it turned out to be a good day.
It really was a turning point in the sport of show jumping.
He recommended me to the Board of Trustees of the Westmoreland Davis Foundation. They ran a riding school in Virginia near Washington, D.C., called Morven Park. It's 1,500 acres of land, a beautiful mansion that was the governor of Virginia's mansion, 2 indoor arenas, a beautiful facility. During that time in 1980, I think it was 87, that he called me and said that he wanted to do that video series to accompany the book that he was publishing, the De Némethy Method book. And would it be possible to do the filming at Morven Park? Obviously, I said, well, that would be wonderful. I'm sure the trustees would be fine, and it would be an honor to have you do it here. And then I said, do you want me to call George Morris or Frank Chapeau, etc., for riders to demonstrate? He said, no. We want to use your horses and your riders.
All the horses, I know the Morven Park horses were the Raoul and Tad's, but all the horses that I rode belonged to me and my husband. And they were all trained in Bert's system, so they knew it all very well. And that's why we use those horses in that. Also, interestingly, in the videos, we didn't do anything more than once. All those sequences were done once, that's it. And I think for me, that shows you how incredible and effective he was as a trainer.
I just started my career riding internationally and in Nations Cups when Frank Chapeau was a chef de keep. He had taken over from Bert. So I think he did a lot of his method of being chef to keep was, I'm sure he picked up a lot from Bert. And then I think it was 1989, we had a Nations Cup in the National Horse Show in the Meadowlands. And for some reason, Frank couldn't be the chef to keep, and they asked Bert to come in and do it. So I think it had been 7 years since he had been the official chef to keep for the team. And so I consider myself so fortunate to have had that opportunity, because he came back and he was amazing as a chef to keep there. We had a meeting, he was very clear, he wanted to know our plan, he got to know all the grooms. I think he even asked them what their experience level was and everything, so everybody was kind of hop-toing and in a good way, because he seemed powerful, but he was also respectful. So I think his method of leadership was really something to admire.
I had the most contact with him after he retired. During the time, he traveled frequently to Hungary and also invited me to Sarasota. We spent long, happy weeks there with him and his wife, Emily, a fantastic and kind-hearted woman. Our family adored her, and I believe she loved us too. They had a wonderful marriage late in life, which meant they had no children. But the love and happiness they shared were truly special, and I wish everyone could experience a marriage as beautiful as the one Bertalan had in the final chapter of his life. When he visited Hungary to receive an award and give a university lecture to the Hungarian equestrian community, he began his speech with these words. "I can't tell you anything new because everything I know, I learned at the School of Riding and Horse-Drawn Teachers, and you have your own people who have learned the very same things." That was a touching moment.
It was a very nice gesture, but the above-mentioned professionals got to the point where they could sit there after a lot of vomiting. Who was still alive among them? There aren't many left.
Bertalan had a remarkable ability to pass on his knowledge. He possessed the empathy, style, and humanity that deeply resonated with riders eager to learn. I believe that was his greatest gift. And I think everybody who knew him think the same. Sadly, Emily was taken by a swift and early battle with cancer, leaving Bert alone in the final years of his life. After her passing, my mother took care of him, staying with him for months in Sarasota. In that time, he still returned home from time to time. We had long conversations, and I learned a great deal from him. I think he was the epitome of a kind of man who may no longer exist today.
Bert's legacy will always be his legacy. He was a good horseman and a good coach and a good chef to keep. He was right for the time. If you had dumped him today from the Hungarian army into this situation, it wouldn't work. We have a word called serendipitous, when everything comes together just right. So what I'm saying is, he couldn't have been born at a better time. His life just worked as it should have. If he had been born 50 years later, we wouldn't know Bert as he was, or the man we know he was. So I think timing's important in life, and he landed on this earth at the right time.
He was the embodiment of the old Hungarian military officer with all his strength and virtues. And ever since, he was a true Hussar. Kind, open, good-humored, and loving. I believe the success of his marriage, the success of his entire career, and the fact that he was able to dedicate his life to what he loved, working with horses and being part of the international equestrian world, made him a deeply content and happy man. He never, not even once, placed himself above anyone. He always identified himself as a former Hussar officer of the Royal Hungarian Defense Forces. He was part of that community, and it was an exceptional generation, a remarkable group of people. I must say, I miss them, not just as individuals, but also the camaraderie they shared. The sense of unity and loyalty forged by the military in the best possible way is something I feel is missing in today's society.
Horsemanship and riding and horses and equestrian sports have changed since I began. The level of riding is fantastic now. When I was riding, there were 10 good riders. Now there are 1,000 good riders. The highest levels have gotten better and better and better and better. But there's also a low level that's become very, very popular. And people that jump low jumps, there's a spot for everyone. So the sport, in a way, is all-inclusive, but again, it takes some money to get a start. I hate to make money the evil thing here, but it is. It takes some money to get a start. But anybody can enjoy our sport now, and in many, many different ways. Many different ways.
There's just thousands of riders out there now, and they tend to have their own system and their own way of coming up. But I think probably with most of the top ones, you'll find that a lot of the gymnastic work and the flat work is still there. And for sure, his system of running the stable and taking care of the horses and presenting the horses and the riders in a beautiful way and all of that. I'd like to think a lot of that has stuck, and for sure we try to do it in our stable, and I know there's quite a few other stables as well that try to not really mimic it, but take a lot of what he did and use it in their own stables.
You know, we all talk about and reminisce about the past, and we have a nature and a tendency to look at the past as only the good and not the bad, right? So they were both. And in sports and in life in general, right? Things are growing, and horse sports in particular are growing at a massive rate in the amount of participants. So as anything grows that fast, and the numbers become so large, and also people are exposed easier, right? I mean, we can see what's happening in different parts of the world at different levels of the sport on YouTube every day, on the live feed from every tour in the world. There's, you know, how many international horse shows going on this weekend alone around the world right now. It's incredible, the growth. And, you know, that's wonderful for the popularity, for the interest in our sport. We need that. But what comes with that is a lot of average, right? It comes with a lot of average. More people to do it. That doesn't necessarily mean there's more people to do it well. But I do believe, I'm an optimist, I do believe at the very top, it's done better than ever. I think what's sad is that younger riders and younger horse people don't seek to learn about the history of our sport. I don't know if that's necessarily going to make them better or worse at the sport, but I think it's important to know where you came from and to have a little feeling of the history and the people who created the platform that you're excelling in.
I've been down in the trenches, I've been lost in the dark, but I always found my way, never strayed too far.
I was a guy who came to the United States after the war became an integral part of this community, the horse community, changed its trajectory, and really was all in American without giving up his Hungarian heritage. And I think that's the beautiful thing about America, right? That's the American dream.
He had so much to give, and really the love and the passion. I mean, that was Bert, the love of the horse and the sport, and the American system and style. That was so cool. That was all Bert. Yeah, the business today, the money today, all of those things. But the horsemanship and the riding and the basis of our sport is still so de Némethy. You know, really.
He was so far ahead of his time. His legacy permeates every part of what we do today with horses, and I say in my personal life to a great extent.
Bert is the guy that if you take away competition, if you take away money, and you just talk about relationship and understanding the horse, he's the guy.
Best in the world.
Training, riding, judging, teaching, building courses, everybody was influenced by him.
I was lucky to have that time with him because it was a great influence on me. It was a great influence, not just riding, but it was a great influence on managing.
Oh, we had a great time. It's the greatest, I'll tell people it's the greatest time of my life.
But he was also just like a good friend. He was a really good friend. I mean, he was a hard coach, but always nurturing and like just a good friend. Like he always just really cared about people individually.
He was very, very generous with his time and his wisdom.
Where we were so lucky to have Bert as our coach and our leader.
He was a wonderful person. I think everybody who was there will say the same thing.
I have a letter that my grandfather wrote to my father, "What makes men great?" My father taught me that what makes men great is that they can look at something and really think about what they're seeing and try to dissect it and come to truly understand that and then inhabit that understanding. But to be truly great, men have to have beautiful dreams about how to make the world better for people to live in, and then work every day to make their beautiful dreams come true. That's the end of the letter. You're building an approach to life which is always looking up, always considering something better, and always that better thing being whatever ennobles being itself. That's the pathway. So, we all are on that pathway, and if we contend with that, it mitigates the basic suffering and boredom of life.
High footprints of life for the world to see. A legacy of love and possibility. I'll make my mark with every step I take in this symphony of dreams, a vow I'll never break.